Paula,
Are we ready?
I think we're ready to get started.
Okay.
Looks like we've got all of our presenters here.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Interagency Council on Homelessness meeting. I'm Paula Kaiser Van Dam, and I was asked to step in because Kelly Rose is still out on medical leave, although it's my understanding she might be participating virtually today. And she is working a small number of hours per week, so she was gonna listen in today. So Kelly, if you can hear us, we're happy to have you. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I'll start off by calling the meeting to order. First item, the other thing I should explain, I guess, is the meeting format for those who are online. As we move through the agenda items, we will have comment from the board, those who are appointed board members. And then when we get down to public comment, if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak, that would be your opportunity to do so. And again, thank you for anyone from the public who is joining us today. Wish I could sort of see who you are, but we don't see that in this room or know who's on virtually. So first item would be the approval of the agenda. So if somebody could move, if either make suggestions or add if there's any additions to the agenda. If not, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda.
Make the motion.
Okay. Sure. Second? Okay. Did you hear that, Jason? Just want to make sure we're not getting too far ahead of you.
I see what the issue is. They called in on a different, they called us into a different meeting, which is why I can't get the screen to share on that.
Do you need to disconnect and get to
I
it?
mean, we would have to have IT come back up and they would have to log everybody out.
Well, I'm okay with not seeing an
Yeah.
agenda because we have the paper
Okay.
one in front of us. And I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to speak for everybody else. So if somebody really wants the agenda up on the screen, please let us know. But
Okay. So I'm sorry, who made the first and second for that? Craig?
yeah.
Okay.
And Mari in second.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a chat in. Susan Williams saying they cannot hear.
They can't hear us at all.
No, maybe just one person.
Okay.
Susan's notorious. Her computer's notorious for
Okay.
not cooperating with
Right.
Teams. Okay.
They can hear us.
All right. If others can hear us, that's great. Okay, perfect. If you will monitor the chat for us, we would love that.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take team effort today. So appreciate that. Okay. So we have a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay. Approval of the agenda. Next item is the approval of the September minutes, meeting minutes. So we'll ask for a motion to approve. A motion to approve. All right, Kayla. Second.
Second.
All right. All right, any discussion or changes to the minutes? Anybody needs to know?
I wasn't here, so I don't vote on that.
You can still vote to approve. I think so,
Yeah.
even if you were in attendance. Yeah,
Yeah,
no problem. Okay,
As long
All
as-
right.
As long as I don't have you as here.
Yeah.
right?
okay, so no comments or changes. So all in favor of the approval of the September minutes, say aye. Any opposed? Say aye. Okay. All right. Next item is the update on the budget and policy priorities for FY24. And Lisa Kimmis, and we should have had you maybe introduce yourself. I don't know if everybody knows Lisa. Does everybody?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Kemis, and I am the Director of Rental Assistance and Homeless Solutions here at MSHDA. Kelly Rose is, you are all familiar with. She is one of our deputy directors and who I report to.
So she's sitting in for Kelly today as a Kelly's voting member, right?
Right.
Okay.
So the update on the budget and policy priorities letter. Kelly did sign the letter on Friday. She had a chance to read through it and signed it Friday, sent it back to us. So this morning I sent it up to our staff, Sam Buckhalter. So he's going to get it over to the Gov's office, and request a meeting, with some of the council here to meet with the Gov's office to talk through some of the priorities that were identified in the letter. I've asked Sam to let me know as soon as the Gov's office has confirmed receipt of the letters, that I know many of you and folks on the line wanted to be able to share with your partners. So as soon as I get confirmation that, I'll let Jason know so he can share with the group.
Perfect. Okay. All right, any questions for Lisa about that? Okay. Okay, next item is the schedule for the ICH meetings for 2024. I'm gonna let Jason do this one because obviously yeah, you have all the details on this and the rationale for these dates and times. So
I-
I'll let you.
I do. Thanks, Paula.
Mhm.
So last year, this time, we had a similar conversation around the schedule for the following year's meetings. And so the rationale is we meet quarterly, the third Monday of the month. Before this year, we were meeting before 2:30. Coming into this year, there was a request from one of the members to bump the meeting time back to try to accommodate their schedule. That person has since resigned. It was Cynthia Latoya Miller, the judge from Detroit. She tendered her resignation after the September meeting. So recognizing that she's now stepped down, and then also recognizing that nearly a majority of the members who are coming to the Lansing office have at least an hour drive, at least that I'm aware of, wondering if we want to actually bump the meeting time back up to a little bit earlier in the afternoon, as opposed to going to the 2:30 to 4:30 slot. So that's the rationale for the dates. As far as I know, we don't overlap with any holidays. This year we had an issue with the June meeting overlapping with Juneteenth. I don't see that happening with 2024. But yeah, if you want to just double check real quick.
And we don't need to vote on this, right? This is just an informational item. Right?
It's more of a check-in to make sure that that we're not missing any holidays. So there's no standing conflicts, and B, just make sure everybody's on the same page and are comfortable with moving the time slot up.
I'm good with the time slot change.
Yeah, if
Anybody
everybody's
have concerns?
So I just have a question while we're on the topic of attendance about if we do need to send a representative, how does that work? Can I send somebody in my place if I ever can't make a meeting, or would they be
Yeah.
able to vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
if they're your
Do we have to like have them name that person so we know who it is and like keep record of that kind of in some way?
in the ideal world, if you could send me an email saying that you're not coming, because I think Michelle has actually had that a couple of times where she hasn't been able to attend, but she has asked the designee from MDE to represent her at the meeting. And of course, we've got Lisa filling in for Kelly today. So yeah. 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 Yeah.
Is that true for all members or only if you represent?
Any of the appointed members could do that if you need.
So not Brian, though. Ryan's an a
Public member.
member of the public. It's the designee from the state agencies.
Can
That's
send
fine.
an alternative.
Yeah, can send an alternate. Yeah.
Looks like I'm,
Okay, got it.
looks like I'm.
Those are good for you? Okay.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm sure
Okay.
Jason will work to get those dates out
I have,
through appointments for us.
Yes.
So they're on your calendar, but sounds like we're good to go for twenty
It's like the
twenty-four.
first half. Yeah. 2:30.
yeah, I'll cancel anything that rolled over from this year. That was more just as a placeholder so that folks recognize that we had meetings going on indefinitely. So I'll cancel those out and then I'll send out new, because we're changing the times.
Okay.
I'll send out a new series of meeting invites for all the members.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, next item is the 2024 Michigan Homeless Policy Council action items. Lindsay and Ashley.
Hi, Jason, I am not able to share.
Oh, this is fun. Give
Um,
me a second. For some reason with these meetings, the security.
Yeah. And hi, everybody. Lindsay Bishop Gilmore, pronoun she, her from CSH.
And we're only hearing her through your computer, Jason.
I am not
So that might be problematic.
It is gonna be problematic. Can you get out? Thank you,
Okay.
Lisa.
Hold on one second, we're gonna.
Jason, can you play some hold music, please?
Sure, let me get right on that. I got light jazz just teed up for this occasion. So for folks who are calling in, we have a slight technical issue. IT connected us to the wrong meeting here in the boardroom. So we're gonna see if we can get somebody from IT up so that everybody can hear the audio. And while we're doing that, Lindsay, you should now be promoted to a presenter.
Oh, yes. Can people hear me any better?
No, we're connected. The only computer in the boardroom that's connected to the right meeting is mine.
Oh,
Yeah. However, people have the handout. So, yeah. Mariam was wondering if we had fancy hold music we could play. Yeah.
Okay, you get to be in charge of that for the next meeting, okay? We'll let you be in charge of figuring that one out.
That's not my.
House party.
I just shared my screen. Can you see it?
So I can, but not in the room, but it's the handout. Everybody that's in the
Yeah,
boardroom has the handout.
yeah, there is one piece at the end that is not in the handout that I'll make sure to, I can send it to you, Jason. I just did it this morning.
Okay.
Should I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Bishop Gilmore from CSH, and I have been working with Ashley Holiday Schmantz, who's on this call as well, to support the membership committee of the campaign on the structure of the Homeless Policy Council. So the structure of that membership that you all approved in September. And then since September, we have requested applications from folks across the state that were interested based on that structure. And so we're here today with a recommendation on the applicants, and we want to share a little bit about the data around number of people that applied, and this was we also have a proposed term limit that we wanted to bring to you all as well. So these are two separate recommendations, and the Policy Council reviewed them last Wednesday. So just first, as a reminder, this was the structure prior to September, and based on the feedback that we got with the action plan, there was a real interest in having a diverse policy council body that has a wide array of perspectives to really support the work of the ICH. And so we restructured this group to be more reflective of people working across the state. And then also just thinking about diversity in a lot of different ways, whether it's geographic, race, experience, and such. And so this is the new structure that you all approved in September as a reminder, with up to 28 members, appointed members, and elected members. So it took a lot of work to get to where we are today. The membership committee has been working on this over the last year, and we've been able to pull in a number of reviewers that supported us with the application review process as well. The work that it took to get here, it wasn't just kind of revising the structure, but we really looked at everything from the application process to our marketing to really make sure that we were taking the work that C4 has supported across the state and implementing that and really thinking about equity in all sorts of ways. So that included revising the membership application. So the application that people filled out, we really focused on expanding our marketing efforts to reach a wide audience. And then we also revised the review process of the applications themselves. We expanded the pool of reviewers. We also created a conflict of interest and confidentiality form, understanding that folks were sharing a lot of personal information with us. And then the last piece was we had a lot of intentional discussions about potential conflicts that people may have, and then also how unconscious bias was showing up throughout the review process. And I think we learned a lot of lessons along the way as well. We also, for both the application process and when identifying reviewers, we ask demographic information about folks just to make sure that we are having a review group that is just as diverse as the application pools as well.
Lindsay, can we take a
yeah.
pause real quick? Our IT
Yeah.
folks are trying to connect the boardroom. So
Perfect.
we'll hopefully get full room audio here in a second. What's that?
Probably should connect.
Probably should connect them. Yeah.
Keep the mission up. Something wrong.
Is it possible to pull Detroit back up? Since public comments not till the end of the meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
But, can anyone on Teams hear us?
Yes.
Can we get that screen back on? Perfect. You can close out the recording. And can you still hear us on the virtual call?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
You ready?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you
Okay.
for your patience, everybody. Thank you, IT.
Thank you.
Thank you, IT.
Sorry about that.
I just want to also acknowledge this, the membership committee and reviewers had a lot of difficult and challenging conversations, which kind of informed our work in a lot of ways. And the Policy Council was really guided by a few different things. One was to have a diverse membership, or the membership committee was driven by having a diverse policy council, people with diverse experiences from communities of all sizes, has a range of different organizations and experiences, and then also is striving to create a place where it's welcoming, inclusive, and creates a sense of belonging in order for work to move forward in a transparent way. The process itself was really quick. The applications were due, and I still didn't fix this. Applications were due on November the 20th, not the 2nd. We had an orientation with reviewers on the 27th and had applicant discussions the first week of December. And then our last membership meeting was on the 11th in order for us to present at the Policy Council. And so a lot of work over a short period of time. Ashley, are there other things that you would share just about the process that the membership committee took?
No, not right now.
Okay, thank you. So the great part, in total, we received 88 applications. That includes the 8 appointed seats. Way more than I think we anticipated, which is very exciting. You can see kind of on the screen, there's 8 appointed seats. And then there's 6 seats on the Policy Council for people with lived experience. We have 26 applicants. For COC lead, we have 5 seats. There were 8 applicants. For provider, we have 6 seats. There were 26 applicants. And then for the open category, where there are 3 seats, and the open is just really a place for people that don't necessarily fit within those other categories. We had 20 applicants there as well. And so I want to share a little bit about data, both about the 88 applicants, and then also some data around the 28 people that the Policy Council approved last week, and comparing that to the whole. But for the 88 applications, 17 of the 20 COCs had some sort of representation that applied. As a whole level, 49% of the applicants were white, 33% were Black, 7 identified as more than one race, and 3 as other. And we definitely noticed by category that the racial demographic shifted significantly, and I'll share that a little bit in just a moment. Overall, there were 23% of folks identified as having a disability. We had wide ranges of ages that applied, with the majority being between 41 and 50. And then, we asked questions about people's direct experience with the systems in which we all are working with, and that you all are all working with, to really understand kind of who has experience with those systems. And so overall, 53% identified having direct experience with homelessness, 50% direct experience with domestic violence, intimate partner violence, 33% with the justice system, 32% with community mental health system, and 28% experience with the child welfare system. I want to just acknowledge that this is like a lot of numbers on the screen and probably not how I should be sharing this, but I wanted to pull this out because I think as the membership committee started looking at it, became really interested. We identified a lot of disparities that we wanted to pay attention to. So we today are recommending 28 different applicants, and what we did as a committee, we compared the 28 people that we are recommending to the 88 overall to make sure that the applicants that are being recommended represented the whole of the applications. And so the darker black lines are the percentage of the 20 of the people that are being recommended within that category. And so you can see that first kind of white category is comparing the 88 applicants to the 28 seats. This is all percentages. And so you can see just the racial breakdown. And then for the appointed members, you can see the racial breakdown for that as well. And then we noticed that the appointed members tended to be appointed, and COC lead members tended to be white, whereas the people with lived experience and the provider category tended to be more identifying people as color, or people identified as people of color. And then the open seat varied a little bit more. And so we compared this data, we looked at this data just to ensure that we were checking our own biases as we were reviewing all of the applications, and that the 28 folks that we're recommending kind of align with the applications that were received. And happy to talk more about the data if folks are interested. In terms of representation across COCs, not everyone identified a COC, being part of a COC or working in a COC. But we did have their kind of where they lived or work, and so use that data to kind of identify the COC area. And so 17% or 17 of the 20 COCs had someone to apply. And you can see of the 88 applicants, 11% were from balance of state, 20% from Detroit, and so on and so forth. And then we had some appointed state members, state partners that did not identify a COC. Also, people could identify that they were part of multiple COCs. And so we included that in the data as well. And the black part of the like outlined section to the far right is of the 28 applicants that we're recommending today, which I promise I will share their names in just a moment. This is kind of the breakdown of representation across the state. Some additional data, and we're just breaking this down from looking at the 88 applicants and then the 28 applicants that are being recommended. For age range, the question about do you identify as having a disability, and asking people to describe their gender identity. And so we have that data to share with you as well. Again, this was something that we looked at very closely within all of the review committees as well. So this is the 28 people that we are recommending to be the policy council starting in 2024. And I'll walk through kind of where the area that of the state that people are from as well. And we used a really great tool, a randomizer online, to create a 2 or 3 year term for folks. And so that was all done at random. So I'll walk through. So you see within the 8 appointed members, you can see the various agencies that people are representing. For the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, Erica was identified and also acknowledged that a new staff person is going to be hired and that they might take on that seat. And so we just wanted to call that out. And then when that happens, we would also ask them to complete the application as well, just to ensure that we have data for the whole body. And people can always decide not to share as well, but just want to make sure that we would have that for everyone. So for the COC lead members, we have Jessica from the Balance of State, Patrice from Kalamazoo, Jill from Genesee Flint, Ashley from Grand Traverse, and Heather from Macomb County. And then for the homeless service provider, I included their agencies here as well. Darius from Avalon Healing Center in Detroit, Julie, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, from Kent County, Grand Rapids, Gabriel from Haven House, Lansing, Ingham, Betsy from Diane Peebler Resource Center and the Upper Peninsula, Tasha from Central City Health in Detroit, and then Sarah Hughes from the Balance of State in Northwest, so the Grand Traverse area. And again, not everyone within this category identified as connecting with a local COC, but I kind of categorize them just based on their address and where they are located. And then the category of people with lived experience. We have Oakland, Detroit, Manistee / Balance of State, Detroit, Balance of State again, and Kalamazoo. So Todd, Susan, Sierra, Jason, Donna, and Dashmir representing those communities. And also for this category, there are a couple people that did not identify a COC that they were a part of, again, just based it on their address. So I'm not sure, Jason, I know with the policy council, we went through everything and then came back. Paula, Jason, is that how you want us to walk through all of the information today?
I think we should take one recommendation at a time. So let's not do the ones about the proposed changes to the bylaws. Let's look at just membership first.
Okay.
So Lindsay, I may have missed this, but wasn't there the open members category?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see you present that one.
Oh. You are absolutely right. I am really sorry. Let me pull that really quickly. Sorry. I did that this morning. Hold on just a second. So for the open categories, We have Greg is from Ann Arbor. And a complex care management program at the University of Michigan Health System. Deja is from Macomb County Government Operations Manager, Department of Health and Community Services. And Bernice is from Grand Rapids, ICCF Community Homes, Vice President of Housing and Family Services. Sorry about that, and I will add it to the slide as people are talking.
Let her add it and then we can. So for a point of order, do we have to have a board member make a motion to approve this with a second, and then we open it up for discussion after that? Okay,
Then we vote for.
after discussion,
Yes.
okay. So
So you're asking for a motion to,
accept the slate of recommended members, and then somebody will have to second it, and then we can open it up for discussion. And then based on that discussion, we'll,
another vote?
well, we will vote, we won't vote on it until after the discussion happens, so,
All right, I'll motion.
okay?
I'll motion.
I need a second, okay?
I have a question for discussion.
Yeah.
So
So, okay, Lindsay, are you guys ready? I know you were trying to update the slide, but are you ready for discussion? Because I have a feeling there are gonna be questions that you all are gonna need to answer as part of the discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
just as a comment, I like the way that you, looked at the selection committee's recommendations and compared it to the demographics of the pool. I think that's a great way to look for bias. I just wondered for when these terms end, who is on the membership selection committee at that point? Does that change? Or how would that process work?
That's a great question, and the membership committee is going to start in 2024, kind of thinking what next for us, because taking this work on was kind of, I think, more than what the membership committee has done in the past. And so the membership committee is open to folks to join. Folks do not have to be policy council members. We're always looking for people to join. I think it will be up to the membership committee at that time when they're kind of managing the review process. I don't know, Ashley, if you would add anything else there.
Oh, that covers it.
So should we maybe open up, the membership of the selection committee to people who weren't selected to sit on the policy council?
Yeah, yes, that is a great point. And we ask the current policy council members to be a part of the review process as well. And so I think for the future kind of membership committee, I think having representation from the policy council makes a lot of sense.
Other questions? I have one, but I don't wanna, go ahead. Yeah, right.
What percentage, if any, of the going forward members are past members or current members?
Oh, I think it's 4, but let me double check.
4 members?
Of
Okay.
the 8
What?
appointed, probably?
No.
Some of the 8
So
appointed are different.
Of the 8 appointed,
5.
Eric, oh, okay, sorry,
Lindsay,
go
it's
ahead.
5 total.
Oh.
5 of the 28 are returning members.
Was that predominantly a result of, I assume there weren't term limits before this recommended change to create term limits?
There were some, so in the previous one, there were sort of appointed seats or organizations who had sort of an ongoing seat. So those seats didn't change that often unless there was like obviously a staff change of sorts. And then there were some open public seats that were, there was a process for selecting. And so those had staggered terms, you know, and served based on that. So those were the seats that predominantly turned over in the past.
And there were 5 of those seats.
5 of those seats that were the public seats in the previous version of this.
There were 5 public.
Yes.
Of the 5 that you're saying are staying on, do we know where they fall? Are they
Predominantly appointed,
appointed?
with the exception of Ashley Halliday Schmatt and the COC representation category.
Is that predominantly just a artifact of sort of who applied, or was it intentionally focused on
Completely random.
completely random?
Well, sorry, Lindsay, I'm speaking on.
No, it was that,
Partly
you know,
because of the makeup is so different of the new group versus what it was before, that there wouldn't have been a lot of, you know, continuation based on that. I mean, the appointed members were the closest ones where that sort of continuation, because we really didn't have people with lived experience, you know, on there per se before in the 5, like public or, you know, positions, et cetera. So,
Okay.
other questions? If not, I'm going to ask them. So I have questions about the 3 open members, just because there was, you know, quite a few applicants in that pool, 20. And I appreciate, you know, all the work that went into kind of putting forth the slate of candidates and the recommendation. But I do have some questions about why these 3 were selected, and they seem to all represent local organizations of sorts. I mean, obviously, they also could bring some specific area of expertise, but I just am curious about some of the state organizations who are also in this space, and if that was given consideration, and sort of why we ended up with these 3 candidates versus the other. And without seeing who the 20 were, it's hard for me to have a more specific question than that, but I'd need some more rationale for the recommendation of these 3 over other candidates that were in that specific category.
yeah,
Because
so
I feel like we
review-
already have massive local representation in these 3 other categories, and so I'm really surprised that we do not have at least some of those open seats representing more sort of statewide partner organizations.
Yeah, so the way that each of the review committees reviewed the slate of applications included going through the responses that people had to the questions. And some people provided very thorough responses, some did not, and everything in between. There was also, I think, a look at the other kind of life experiences that people were bringing, any direct experiences, involvement with any of the other systems as well, and also ensuring that from a kind of racial perspective as well, that we were not recommending, you know, a slate of applicants that were all one, you know, white or just trying to be really thoughtful and intentional. And we also made the decision to not share the list of all of the applicants. We felt that that wasn't really necessary. And so that's why we are not sharing that. And I'll say that there wasn't much conversation within the review committees around folks that were bringing kind of a statewide perspective. And I also don't kind of recall that being brought up in the responses either that applicants brought or submitted that could bring that perspective. But Ashley, I know you weren't able to participate in this review process or this committee. But Jason, I know that you listened in as well. Is there anything else that you would add?
So based on what your response was, we did not have any applicants that represented statewide organizations. Is that correct? Or even regional organizations? Is that,
Um,
I just want to make
I-
sure of the 20 applicants, no one represented a statewide organization or a regional organization.
That's not what I'm saying at all. I am looking at the moment and we'll have a better response in just a moment.
I think Catherine might have put that in the chat, Lindsay, that there might not have been many or maybe any applicants with state level or statewide experience in that group, but I know you're checking, so.
Yeah. Yeah, there weren't. Most of it, I can't see any applicants that were statewide based on organization and a quick remembering people's applications. And thank you, Catherine, for dropping that in because I know that you were part of that review process. But most people were working at a local level.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I
Appreciate
would
that
say, yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so can you also talk a little bit about, like, given the new makeup of the slate and the recommendation, what the sort of orientation and onboarding process is going to be, and then also what's the timeline and the process that will be used to select leadership for this group?
Great question. And so, this group of new members, if approved today, will be meeting in January. And we have been having conversations around what does that onboarding kind of look like. We know because of the kind of diversity of experiences that people are going to have, that the onboarding maybe that has been provided in the past is going to have to change. And so the membership committee is going to be looking at that. We have looked at it in some ways. We're going to continue to look at that and identify ways to support the membership in the future. That's something that the membership committee sees as potentially our role in 2024 is playing that support role to ensure that people have the information that they need to actively engage and participate. And as for leadership, Christina Soulard from MISHA and Ashley, who are currently the co-chairs of the Policy Council, have agreed to support with the January meeting and kind of at that meeting identify, we are not recommending a process of how they identify leadership and really leaving some of that up to the group and how it sees best to operate.
And is that not part of the bylaws? The bylaws don't say how we elect leadership?
Yeah, you have to submit. So I can step in here, Lindsay. So the bylaws for co-chairs, they have to submit a letter of interest. So we have a job description that we'll share with the new members at the January meeting and let them know the application process.
So if anybody interested could submit the letter?
Any of the 28
Right.
members could submit a letter of interest.
And are we still planning to use the co-chair?
Model?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who's the selection for the co-chairs?
So,
They elect the co-chair, so, yeah.
Yeah.
So then the slate, I mean, anybody who's interested would,
Yep.
submit their letter of interest, and that would be shared with membership. And then, I'm assuming at the February meeting, you will
February,
take a vote
we
for,
would, yeah,
you would elect the new leadership.
yep.
So then who runs the February meeting?
Well, I mean,
Was it
I think
previous
it's gonna,
person?
yeah, because Ashley is one of the current ones, and she's, the only current one, co-chair, that's gonna be on the new group. So I think she would be able to kind of play that role until a new person is elected.
I just wanted to make sure we had a plan for,
Yeah,
they're getting the letter in the January meeting.
Right.
They have time to submit it to.
right, exactly.
And
So
then people
that-
to review.
Right, so because she is staying on, I'm assuming she can kind of continue to play that role until a new co-chairs are elected. So, okay, those are my questions, sorry, I didn't mean to dominate the conversation, but any other questions or items for discussion?
This is just a note. So when you guys went through the randomizer, I assume it's half of the people have a 2-year term and half the people have a 3-year term, just to make sure that we're not all doing a giant changeover again,
That is
correct?
correct.
Okay,
If
just
you-
wanted to clarify.
If you add the numbers, 14 or 2-year, 14 or 3-year.
What was the term limit prior for non-appointed?
2 years, and there was no language about,
So you could theoretically be back to back to back to back.
Correct.
yeah,
But every 2 years was up for,
yeah,
Correct.
it was a competitive process every 2 years.
got it. Okay, this seems more manageable.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? If not, we'll move to take a vote. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay. The slate proceeds. It's approved.
Yay. I just had like a little party at my desk, just so you know.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you for your work.
Quite a process.
Okay, so the second recommendation then is around the term limit policy.
Yeah, so this was something
So-
that we didn't anticipate until we started looking at some of the data.
Yeah.
And we have realized like part of this is like an onion. The more we pull back, the more we find that we need to talk about and work through. I think just the questions around orientation is a perfect one. So the term limit policy that we're recommending is that members can serve no more than 5 years consecutively, so 2 terms equaling 5 years, and must take 2 years off before reapplying. And this would apply to all members, both appointed and elected. So while we're making this recommendation, we also want to be really clear that we still need people to participate throughout the campaign and all of the committees. You do not have to be a voting member of the Policy Council to be a part of the committees. And so just want to make that really clear. And the reason that we decided to make it apply to both appointed members and elected members, and this led to a really good conversation within our committee, is when we started to look at the racial demographics of the different categories of folks. I think folks within the appointed tended to be more of the majority than some of the other categories, and felt that it was really important to create leadership opportunities within State Department agencies and within kind of the elected seats as well. And so we definitely did not make this decision lightly and know that it's kind of uncommon. Really wanted to be intentional and have conversations around how do we create diversity when we look across all categories of folks. And so that was how we arrived at this policy.
Okay. So again, we would need to have a motion to accept the membership or term limits, and then a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Cool.
Okay?
I have a second.
Okay. Okay. So opening it up for discussion where the specific language, hopefully you all see it. There's a piece of paper in your packet that had the specific language. Let me read it. A member of the the Michigan Homeless Policy Council can serve no more than 5 years consecutively, 2 terms equaling 5 years, and must take 2 years off before reapplying to join the Policy Council. And so as they clarified, that would be all members, including the appointed members that represent sort of those state departments and state agencies. So questions? Craig,
Yeah,
or discussion?
I question kind of the logic of, right now, in theory, everybody can be reappointed for those full 5, for the 5 years. Then everybody's got to sit out. To me, it would make more sense to have it staggered at the beginning, one half do 2, the other half do 3, and then after that, continue on 3-year terms. Because the next group comes in at 2. I think there's a chance you could lose everybody, and it could be a drain, yeah.
Right. Well, the other question I had was, so if I get appointed my first term to a 2-year term, and then I reapply, would I not just be put back into the same term I was in, because that's the seat that's sort of open? So really, you can only serve 4 years, but you've served 2 terms, so you don't, or if you were a 3-year and you get appointed to 2 3-year terms, you serve 6 years.
We would, so the logic was we would track who got the 2-year and 3-year terms and flip them. So that's why you get to the max of 5.
But you don't normally do it that way.
Yeah.
Usually you track a term and somebody leaves, that is the position that is open, and the term doesn't change of that position. So I'm not tracking the logic. That's just not how we've done boards in the past, where you flip the term or change the term. Once the term has sort of been established, it remains that, and that's the term that's open, and whoever you put in that open seat when you do it goes back into the term that was open.
So maybe another way to do it would be to stagger 2 years and 3-year terms. Then everything afterwards is a
3-year term.
And the maximum you can serve is 6 years.
Correct, and so, yes.
As opposed to 5, because otherwise you're pretty much ensuring that almost your entire group is going to have to all flip at the same time. And at that point, why stagger?
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. I take my motion back.
So we need to just change the motion then.
Sure.
So, but is there, I don't know, Lindsay, if you have a response to our discussion, if there's questions or concerns about what we're saying.
No, I think that makes total sense.
So essentially, normal terms per the bylaws will be 3 years.
Correct.
We're just setting some at 2
And
in order to stagger when.
Right, so half the positions will turn over in 2 years, and then the other half of the positions should be turning over in 3 years. But at that point, when they turn over, it's a new 3-year term for everybody
And then
moving forward.
naturally, the rest.
Then half the board turns over, at a time.
Yeah.
Correct,
And eventually it'll end up being even more staggered.
correct.
If people resign in the middle, what would that look like?
Somebody would just be appointed to fill the term, the remaining term, but you're right, does that count as their,
Like if,
does that count towards their years, or does it not count? Typically,
I
it
would-
doesn't count if they're appointed in a mid-term position, but,
Given the size of the body, I feel like you could almost just roll the dice and say, everybody starts with a 3-year term. So if that was to happen, somebody comes on with a 3-year term, now you're even more staggered. And you're only filling terms, any given year, you're only filling terms that are expiring. So you're not gonna have like a large group all at once again.
yeah, and you're gonna have a process almost, every year, you know what I mean?
I just wasn't sure if like the bylaws, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we have to articulate.
That
Correct.
one of these people
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah.
And the other, I forgot to ask this clarifying question, because it said if a person recommended is no longer able to fill the role, alternate applicants have been identified. But you all would bring those alternate applicants back to this board for approval of those. They're not just gonna get slated in, correct?
We needed to talk about what that process would look like.
Well, I'm assuming if we approve
Approve
this,
this
we're gonna
later.
approve any new
Yeah.
additions that come through, so.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to clarify, because I did highlight that in my notes to ask that question.
Yeah, as it stands, nobody that has been approved has.
Said they won't do it.
Right, but we also haven't reached out to finalize anybody
Mhm.
either.
Okay, all right. Sorry, not to take us off subject. Okay, so we're saying then, so the clarification about terms are that at the start of the new composition, they're 2- and 3-year terms. But once those terms end, everybody would be appointed to a 3-year term after that. So the new language of the proposed change would be, can serve no more than 2 terms? Is that what we're trying to say? And not worry about the years? Because right now we can't, it would be 5 initially possibly, or whatever,
Depends.
but it could be 6, no more than 5, or we could just say no
Well,
more than
basically
6
saying-
years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is if you say no more than 6,
Yeah,
then we're basically saying half of this group's gonna turn over at 5 years.
Yeah.
Or at 2
Right.
or 3, if they don't.
correct,
But at a maximum of 5 years, half theoretically at 6 years.
right.
And then
Then it'll be 6 moving forward. I mean,
it'll
after you
be
get.
3, it'll be up to 2 3-year terms
Mhm.
moving forward.
Mhm.
Not an insignificant amount
Number.
of time. But then the question is, if somebody comes off midterm, do you put somebody in to finish out their term, or do you say start them over, and it's okay if over time there's even more staggering?
Yeah,
I think the staggering over time is fine, but we just have to decide if we want people to serve more than 6 years.
right.
If they finished 1 term and then, like, if they finished the first term and then had 2 3-year terms, that would be more than 6, so.
No, I don't think we would have that. So like if we're only staggering this first year, right? So we're bringing some people at 2 and some people at 3, specifically so that not everybody finishes at 6 years. Going forward, it would be only 3-year terms.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody finished like, if I have a 2-year term and somebody finishes my term, and then they would have 2 more terms after that, it could potentially be
Oh,
more
like
than
if you're
6
only on
years.
for 1 year or
Right.
something, and
Yeah.
somebody comes in at 3 years and.
Yeah.
So
I don't care either way.
Full terms?
2 full terms is the max,
I mean, we could do 2 full terms or 7 years, so that way if you basically, like,
Yeah.
if you're there for more than
Less
half
than 1 year.
of
Yeah.
the term,
I like
roughly,
that.
Right.
then like, it doesn't really count. But
Yeah.
if you're a full, almost full term, then,
Yeah, more than a year is half of a full 2-year term, so I think that's a good.
balance point.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't just start that person at a full 3-year term?
That's our debate is, do we want to
Oh, gotcha.
start them at a full 3-year, and basically the membership committee would then probably meet in years they would not normally meet to do the application. So it is a bigger push from, I guess, all of us.
It's
to
a
get
bigger,
people.
the group would have to meet more frequently, but about less seats to fill.
Well, and they should have possibly more like, you're running a process almost every year
True.
instead
You
of,
would be.
you would have a year off in the way that this process is currently working.
Oh, yeah, but what if, so would we be letting people appoint someone?
No,
to
they
manage their
would,
term?
they would have to do a
Yeah.
process when there's a
Well, that is
vacancy.
a lot of work.
I mean, the option could be if there's a vacancy,
You just leave
you
it.
could just leave it vacant for the, I mean,
Unless it's an
depending.
appointed position, maybe appointed position, somebody could be appointed to fill the rest of the
Correct, because
term.
that's a fairly easy process
Yeah.
of approval, but for the elected one,
But then that unfairly skews it potentially toward appointed positions versus public positions, so.
And public positions right now are skewed that more people with lived experience of minority groups are in the public, not in the appointed positions.
right.
So we could lose our intended purpose if we do it that way?
Well, why don't we let them come back with recommendations specific to how they fill a vacant term instead of us trying to, solve that problem
So we
today.
table the bylaw question, is that essentially the?
Do we need to know that? Is it how they fill vacancies, or can we still just say the members of the policy council can serve no more than 6 years consecutively, two terms for a maximum of, oh, well, I guess we need to know the answer to that question, don't we?
Or,
We will before the end of any of the terms.
Right.
but I guess to change the bylaws, we just need to be, this body needs to be notified 5 days before the meeting. So we could do this correct, and then if they make a change that would change the bylaws, we could revote at any, like, there's nothing that limits us in the bylaws for how often we change the bylaws.
Correct.
That's a good point. We could just vote, we could even vote on it.
So do we just leave it as no more than 6 years consecutively now, or do you want to just leave it at the 5, Ryan, because that's what we accepted as the motion?
I guess it doesn't make a difference since we're gonna probably revise it at our next meeting.
Or in a couple meetings when they have a chance to settle
Sure,
it. I don't know
sure.
that they'll know it by the next meeting, but.
Sure.
So,
Okay, hold tight, you don't leave until we vote on this, because we need you for the forum. Sorry, I know you gotta get it, because you got kids to
quick
pick up.
question, do we have to vote if we want to change it, or can someone just make a motion to vote as amended through the year?
Say that again?
We don't have to vote again when it's.
That's what I'm saying, do we have to vote? So I'm saying like right now to vote, can we vote on the amended or do we have to vote?
Do we want to just table this motion and
Yeah.
wait
Yeah.
for more information, and then we'll bring it back up? Yes. So do we have to, or do we have to vote to deny it, just like vote it down, just because, not because we're not supportive of this, but because we want it changed? Do we have to vote with was originally proposed and vote it down so that something new can get proposed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. We do have to, all right, I mean, that's what
Wait,
it
but then
feels
the question
like.
becomes, what is the default state of all these people that we just appointed to the?
Well, they still have terms, they're coming into a 2 or a 3 year term. This doesn't
This only
really,
addresses what happens after those.
correct, so that we don't need a solution to this, like, right this second. Like, we've got time to figure out this bylaw change about how many terms or years somebody can serve.
I guess with that in mind, it doesn't hurt to just adopt the bylaws as recommended and then alter them.
So you're back to accepting,
What the
Or
original
what- then
recommendation
at
was.
least
All right,
there's
Michelle's got,
Or if you leave, we don't have quorum and can't vote.
or
Or we could all just
actually, if
vote
she
no.
leaves, you still have quorum.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Not to be that, not
we
to be
do?
that
But I
guy.
guess, if we vote
Yeah.
this no, and then someone makes a motion to do the change to 6, so that way we at least match what we think we want, and then we can just rechange.
Well, why don't we
it.
just amend it?
That's what I'm saying, is that I think we have to vote on the original,
we have to vote what you originally proposed down.
You can't just amend the.
or can we,
Then we can make a new motion.
and then one of us makes a new motion to change.
Can we motion to table?
Okay.
Can we just motion to table it for the next meeting, bring it back, and have them bring it back?
Yeah, but we got, I think we do have to vote down the original motion first, and then motion to table.
Okay, we do, okay.
I think,
I don't know, who's our Robert's Rule of Orders, like,
like, because
Clearly
we
not.
motioned
Not
to
me.
table.
It's not me either, sorry. No, so, okay, so we know we want it to change. We know that the original proposed is not gonna work based on the conversation that we've had. So my suggestion is knowing that, let's just vote this down and then we leave it and then they can come back with a different one based on their discussions when they're ready for that. How does that sound?
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all in favor of the term limits, to be, no more than 5 years consecutively, 2 terms equaling 5 years, and you must take 2 years off before reapplying, say aye. Anybody opposed, say aye. Aye. Okay, so the recommendation is voted down, not because we don't support it, but we want changes to it. And so we'll wait for them to bring back, a different recommendation based on our discussion today at a future meeting. Okay? Okay, all right, thank you.
Another question kind of similar around this, not specific to the years, but I wondered, at least with the Department of Ed, we have obviously the home health education program. So there's a specific program that should be connected, and in fact, HUD and our McKinney-Vento laws address that. Do we need any more specificity in the appointed members to ensure that there is continuity across the years for those programs that do have requirements around coordination and collaboration? So just wondering if that would be an additional place to be more specific around that? I mean,
The appointed position specifically.
yeah, I mean, I think, like, today, it's fine. I mean, in 5 years or whatever, I could have our consultants step in and do that. But what happens long-term when that historical knowledge is no longer a part of the memory of the organization? How can we protect those requirements for collaboration within what we're constructing?
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it's only us or if there's other agencies where that would be, or organizations where that would also be true.
Well, I mean, I could say that in the same vein for MDHHS, because we're such an extraordinarily large agency that, you know, it could easily get skewed to be a different, you know, area, not representing kind of our housing and homeless services, who's, you know, 100% focused on, you know, this issue. So, I mean, I could see we could be in the same boat in 5 or 10 years if, you know, some of us leave the department, you know what I mean, leave and there's transition there. So maybe that is, like, maybe further discussion we want to have about the appointed positions on the policy council.
Okay. So perhaps we ask the NHPC to consider more specificity
Yeah,
in their appointed position.
the membership committee to bring back some recommendations associated with that.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, since we did not change the bylaws, everyone we just elected by default is now currently in like a 2-year term?
No, the terms it was just how, the terms are set based on what, we approved, because they were listed in that. It's just how many years total they can be on that has to change.
But what I'm saying is default bylaws only allow for two-year terms by members of the general public.
You're correct, right?
That's why I think the change is being made.
The current bylaws is a 2-year unlimited. So, but Paul is correct, we designated some 3-year terms. That was approved. So,
Can we do that if the bylaws don't have a category? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, because we're gonna change them before then.
I mean, we also could motion to amend at this point, but no, I don't want to make a motion until we agree that we actually want to vote. Or like have a discussion, we have a discussion about the potential of, do we want to change this to the 6 year for now, so we don't, if there is a legal action of, you know, for the people who
Somebody
picked out a 3-year
challenging a
term.
3-year term, if that was legal or not.
Like, I guess, can we have a discussion without making, can I motion to discuss that? I don't know, like, what am I supposed to? Still trying, sorry, Jason.
I know what we need in the future meeting. We need a training on Robert's rules or however, like what the, operating procedures are for the board as we make. Seriously, I'm not trying to be funny about that, and I know that would be like boring as all get out, but like it really would be helpful for us to know that as a governor appointed board that we really are, following the proper procedures and making, decisions, et cetera. So, okay. I'm good with like accepting a motion to, change it to 6 years, and then we just approve that for now, knowing there's probably gonna be an additional change to that. I mean, if somebody wants to make that motion and approve, and second it, I mean. So we would just update what they gave us with 6 years is what you were thinking?
Yeah, so just basically crossing out the 5 years, changing them to 6 in both spots, and then
Yeah.
from there, the policy council. So you have a member of the MHPC can serve no more than 5 years consecutively, change that to 6, and then parentheses, it says 2 terms equaling 5 years, so I would change that to 6 as well. So that's what I'm saying in that.
But the initial one,
Just that sentence.
but the 2 terms equaling 6 years, it would be, it's not equal, it could be up to 6 years.
Yeah.
Because
in
in the first year, the 2 terms are only gonna equal 5 years, right? For those who had a 2-year appointment, right? So for 50%, it's only gonna be 5.
Wait, why don't we just get rid of everything in parentheses, just change it to 6? Remember that MHPC can serve no more than 6 years consecutively.
And must take 2 years off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Then
works.
we can just leave it to the policy council to determine how they wanna fill it in that.
Yeah.
We know there's
And there's
term
not
limits.
terms.
They could be 3 2-year terms, they could be 2 3-year terms, it can be however, whatever we elect, right? The terms don't have to be fixed amounts. We just essentially say, recommend however many years terms you want, but nobody can serve more than 6.
But then you get in trouble, you get to the point of how many, like, trying to have consistency of how many are turning over in a given year.
Yeah. I think
True.
if we ask MHPC to include in its next set of recommendations that the normal term will be 3 years, and that they provide, explanation on how they would like to reassign or continue.
Fill vacant terms.
Fill vacant terms. Then we can ask for those 2 pieces and then do exactly what you just said of crossing out the stuff in the parentheses. Because then that will come in later, but at the same time, this then protects us from the fact that some of those terms do not, or they go beyond the 2 years that are currently allowable. So I think you kind of hit a sweet spot with that.
Well, if we get rid of the 2 terms equaling 5 years, and we just say no more than 6 years, then it kind of defaults. If we give somebody 2 years and then their next term is 3 years, then they're at 5, you're not gonna give them a 1-year term. At that point, they're gonna be, you know what I'm saying?
Correct.
It's not perfect, but it allows for the decision that we just made in regards to as a holdover.
And in order to still prevent that from happening in the future, we could that we could entertain a recommendation that a normal term gets set at 3 years.
Sure.
Right.
Right?
Mhm. Okay, so who wants to make the recommendation?
I will make a motion to vote on the amended language.
Okay,
Changing it to 6 years consecutively with a 2-year break.
okay, do we have a second? Okay, Michelle seconds. Okay. Any further discussion? Although I think we've already had we did the discussion in advance of the actual motion, but that's okay. We got there. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay. All right, so we now have that as a temporary hold, and then, the membership committee can look at that. They can come back and just give us their recommendation, or like what the language in the bylaws are around the filling vacant terms and how that counts towards those 6 years or whatever. So, and if we need to make any amendments at that point, they can recommend language for what amendment they want to see. Okay?
Great.
Wow, we may have been over our time limit for that, sorry. Okay, that was a lot, but great work, thanks everyone. Okay, next item is our Racial Equity Action Plan, and the Arc for Justice team is gonna walk us through that. And I know we're supposed to end right at 4:30, so if you guys could maybe shrink that to about 35 minutes probably to get us there, and leaves us a little bit of time for any last minute things. I want to make sure we have time for public comment, if there is any, so.
Absolutely, no problem. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us today. Does everyone need to sort of pause? You all went through a lot there, and just sort of and recenter. Get ready to pivot into another deep dive. So just let us know if you need a moment. Everybody okay?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Lisa, if you want to start sharing the screen. So today what we've been
I
asked
need
to do.
permission. Sorry,
Okay.
Regina. I put that in the chat. I don't have permission to share yet. If somebody could
Okay.
grant that.
Working on that. Sorry, Lisa.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. So for today, we've been asked to walk through the draft racial equity plan. And so let me give a little bit of a framing around there. This is not with all of the narrative. This is specifically the focus areas, the strategies, and action steps, right? So it's just that part of it. And we're going to drop some questions into the chat that may be some guiding questions. And so that as you're seeing each one of these focus areas, the strategies and action steps, that maybe give a little bit of a guidance or some parameters around questions. But of course, I shouldn't even say parameters. Ask any questions that you like. But as we're thinking about the feedback that we want, to make sure that we're capturing everything that folks shared within their CERT teams, all of the things that all of the partners need. So we want to just sort of check for a little bit of accuracy, and then also looking for feasibility, looking for impact, all of those things. So as we're walking through, please jump in. Like, you don't have to raise hands, just start talking and asking questions or chat them in. Okay? Is that all right with everyone?
I put some questions in the chat for folks to be thinking about as well.
Okay. So let's just give everyone a moment to read through those questions so they can sort of carry those as we begin talking. So I'll just pause for a moment here.
So some of us here don't have it, and it's really hard to read. So Craig, would you be so kind? You're monitoring the chat for us to read the questions to us here.
For any CERT members present, this plan is reflective of the work they did and their priorities. What do they like or dislike about the plan? Do any of the strategies face significant barriers to implementation or seem infeasible? Do they have recommendations about how to make these strategies and action steps more specific to Michigan and/or Michigan regions? Do they have questions about any strategies, action steps, or need clarification on anything?
Okay. And so all of these were generated, of course, from you all and the CERT teams. But as you're thinking about them, just like you did there, you may want to even drill down any more. You may know of specific policies or practices even that are standing in the way of some of these strategies and action steps. So this is the time, at least, and listen, this won't be the last time that we want to get your input on this as we move toward trying to finalize an action plan. Okay, so there were 5 different focus areas, and so we'll get started with the first one, racial disparities for households experiencing housing instability and homelessness. Now, what we tried to do with each one of these focus areas was to align that with your state plan. And so you'll see that we put the specific goals that we think most closely align with your state plan in there, because we want to make sure that we are as much in close proximity and alignment with you as possible for this. So it's not like, oh, we got these 2 big things that are walking along different pathways, okay? For each of the focus areas, you'll notice that there are multiple strategies and then a lot more of the action steps. So again, focus area 1, racial disparities for households experiencing housing instability and homelessness was the focus area. Looking at a couple of strategies, and we won't go through each one of them because we'll try to move it in under your time at about 30 minutes. But one of the strategies address the coordinated entry process at the local level and improve experiences of people using the homeless response system. So we'll clue in on these first. So when we're talking about addressing those coordinated entry system processes at the local level, here is where that demonstration project or pilot comes in that we've been talking about. Really, how do we go about creating a more equitable assessment process as well as a prioritization process and tool, right? And some of the things that we've already begun to talk about is how do we take more factors into consideration? We know that the VI-SPDAT, some of the factors that it took into consideration, the questions that it asked, certainly were not reflective of all of the populations within Michigan or in fact within the entire nation. And so we'll be looking at some different factors, right? And some of those are around those that the most marginalized populations, trying to make sure that their experiences are a part of those new questions of a new way of doing this assessment and prioritization. Okay. So a couple more, looking at household strengths and preferences. And one of the things that we have noticed across the country is although we say things like, let's be strength-based and asset-based in everything that we do, we really aren't, right? We don't take those things into consideration when we're looking at assessment processes and looking at prioritization. And so getting a lot more clear and granular about what does that really mean to look at things through a strength base, through what people already are bringing to the table, when trying to determine what else is needed, right? Part of it, we want to make sure that this process, right, is trauma informed and client centered and also healing centered. We know for a fact, I mean, we have research that shows from a lot of qualitative data that this process re-traumatizes people, right? So we want to make sure that when we're trying to redo or reimagine this coordinated entry system process at the local levels, that we're taking that into consideration in all that we do, right? And which leads us then into how do we really go about improving the experiences of people that are using our homeless response systems, right? A lot of times we are so focused on the technical aspects that we forget that, hello, right? There are people, there are human beings that are going through this system. And so one of the things that we wanted to highlight for you all and to certainly get some discussion around was developing standards of care across all of the state-funded programs that center lived experiences of people, right? That use those programs so that we can develop accountability structures, right? When you put together a standard of care, how do you make sure that you are auditing that you're keeping up with it? Because it's all about holding accountability, right? And so part of that is making sure that everyone knows how to collect that qualitative data, to ask, to find out if in fact those standards of care are being met, right? And so at the end of the day, we're trying to get to a different kind of service delivery throughout the entire homeless response system process. And so I want to just stop there, looking at those 2 strategies again. So making sure that we're looking at our coordinated entry system at the local level, and then also trying to improve the experiences of people that are going through the homeless response system, knowing that this is perhaps one of the most upsetting and crisis-filled, trauma-filled times of people's lives or their families' lives And so how can we make sure that they go through that process with dignity, with respect, with the support that they need at all levels? So let's just pause there for a moment and get a sense of what you're thinking about those first two.
Is that question directed at us?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Zoom meeting.
Yes, for
So
anyone.
I mean, I think they're great initial focus points for the reasons that you said. I think the moment that sets, especially coordinated entry, and just improving experiences generally, but the point of entry into the homeless service system, I think, sets a really clear tone for how people feel throughout the rest of the process, and sometimes could be make or break as to whether that's a collaborative process that really feels empowering to the person and doesn't feel like a set of barriers to try to overcome in and of itself. I was going to give the feedback of, I think, one of the key barriers to that, which we've discussed at this table in the past, is lack of resources to be able to hire staff with the experience to have positive interactions, be the first interaction that a person experiencing that trauma has. But I think it's the next recommendation. So I think that it doesn't fall under that category, but where was that?
No, that's
Or
exactly
maybe it
it.
is under that category. It's
Yeah,
under increasing
that's
capacity. It's the next,
it's,
it's the next
that's
strategy.
right. It's the next
So,
strategy.
so
Yeah.
it's already accounted for. I mean, that would have been the only, thought that I had that seemed to be missing from those action steps. So it's the next strategy, so.
No, that's exactly right, because if you don't have the staff in place that can do that, one, who have the skill sets and who have the time, right? If folks are carrying, a 50 to 1 ratio of quote cases, I don't even like to call them, people cases, but if they're working with 50 different people or 50 different households, you don't even have the time. Forget about even not having the skill set, right? And because there's so much turnover, and Michigan is not the only place that experiences that, because one, this is just hard, right? It's hard. And then there's unfortunately really low pay. And so there's that constant cycle of turnover. So you're constantly bringing new people into these entry level positions, but which are perhaps the most important positions, because like you said, this is the first point when someone is coming in crisis, right? And you're set up for the entire thing. Is this going to be an experience that I know somebody's there to support me? It's not about me just jumping through hoops and meeting some compliance, but about people seeing me as a full person. And so absolutely the skill sets have to be there and the time to actually do that kind of work.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump us too far ahead because I know it's the next strategy, but I will say that something that isn't necessarily articulated here that I think is an important piece of that our organization is running into right now is that you also have to take into account the issue of internal equity of the workforce within organizations where you're making those changes. So you can't just say, hey, we've got, a new grant that came in and we applied within the scope of that grant to have lower caseloads and to have, to move in the direction of compensation that reflects that. It has, we have, as a community, have to be thinking about how we raise the water level all at once. Otherwise, we're creating all kinds of other unintended destabilizing effects within the providers. So I just wanted to avoid that. I don't see that here.
No, that's good.
The
That's a
other-
great addition. Thank you.
One question I have is the developing the standards of care across the state-funded programs, and why we're just looking at state-funded programs and not really thinking about, the local COCs that, make a lot of decisions about funding programs as well, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing programs, et cetera. So why are we only looking at state-funded to develop these standards of care, and why aren't we trying to do a more holistic standard of care practice across all the systems of funding?
Oh my gosh, yes, great question. And we believe that that's essential. What we were trying to figure out, and we can certainly suggest that as well and put that in, is that what can actually be held accountable to by you all. And so, and I know that there's a little bit of overlap, you know, with the funding that comes from the state to some of those local programs. And so we were thinking of like, where are the 2 points of accountability? There's, to your point, some that are at the local level, like those specifically, though the housing programs, the permanent supportive housing, all the things that they get through the COC NOFA or NOFO process, right? And then the funds that come from the state. But you're absolutely right. The standards of care need to be there across the board. But we'll have to figure out at what points are the accountability held to each one. Who's going to hold the account to those?
Okay.
I
Definitely.
think people risk if we don't have an overt strategy to essentially advocate for those standards of care to be adopted across different layers of the funding stream, the risk that we hold, and I've already started to see this happen with some grants that have differentiated, particular goals around equity, is what happens at the local level as people start trying to work around, well, this program maybe doesn't meet that standard of care, so let's just direct this grant to that program, and we'll focus the money that does require it on the program that does reach it, which kind of defeats the purpose. Yeah. So I think we do need to articulate that in some way.
Great points from both of you all. Yes. You're exactly right. We don't want to create that unintended consequence by trying to hold them a little bit separate in terms of accountability and just say, period. So developing standards across programs, period, and help into developing those. So nobody can sort of shop around where they want a program that they don't want to meet certain standards. That's good.
I wonder if one way to accomplish that would be to separate the development of the standards of care and the accountability pieces, because then you could look at the standards more holistically and then look at the difference between authority versus influence in terms of the accountability and where those pressure points might be.
I like that a lot. And even just the separation of authority around influence, those kinds of pressure points, because here's the thing. The authority and the certainly the funding allocations that come with that authority, there's going to be a little peer pressure. If folks see that other folks are being incentivized or are getting funding because they're meeting those standards of care, I'm going to be like, I need to get in the game with my peers. But then also, it's going to look badly, right, on those other organizations that don't adopt those standards of care and their other peers have. And so how do you even work in tandem? How do you collaborate if you all are working from such different standards of care? So that's good. I'm just giving people time to scan some of the others. I didn't want to just read all of them out loud, but some of the action steps that it would take to get to improving that experience. I'll just pull out a couple of those around engaging and partnering with culturally specific advocates and advisors. And some we've already had the privilege of working with, but making sure that these are full partnerships rather than just sort of ad hoc. Oh, this came up, let's go and talk to this person, but they're at the table to design with everyone the standards of care and making sure that the experience is one of dignity and respect. Any other follow-up questions on those particular ones? Okay. Lisa, if you want to scroll up just a wee bit, and I think that we've already talked a little bit about the increasing the capacity of folks to be able to deliver those kinds of services, and what would it take actually to do that, right? And part of it, we have to keep coming back to it. It seems like it should just be a given, but we don't make assumptions. We can say that, well, if people have a social work background, maybe they learn that this is a necessity of doing those things, but they might not have, or they may not be coming into it. I've met a few, no more than a few, service providers who come in with a different attitude, right? They do come in with it, or like, do as I say do, right? And not this kind of more embracing, this kind of trauma informed. And so just making sure that people understand that that's what is the expectation of them in every position, not just frontline responders, but in every position, right? And then making sure that they have the ability to tap into those classes and practicum. One of the other things that we want to make sure of is that it's not about just taking X number of classes to say, oh, now I know how to be culturally responsive to people, but rather how do we make sure that you are practicing those things, that people have the necessary coaching, people have the necessary feedback to make sure that that is happening, okay? And not at all in a punitive way, right? But it's making sure that everyone is cared for in the way that is respectful. Okay. And then the final strategy for this one is around just those continued learning and application of racial equity principles and practices. Again, it always comes down to, we've heard, Lisa and I've heard so often, people get really excited, as they well should. Like they'll go to maybe a 2-day racial equity, course, or maybe do some modules, and they start to feel really good, like, I got this now, right? And we need to help people to understand that this is a lifelong process, right? You got to keep coming back and getting refreshers and working through things and all. I tell people, I've been in this game more years than I will ever admit, right? And I am constantly learning and working with other racial justice folks, so that we're sharpening each other and figuring out ways to take this work on. And so the same has to be for every person that's providing direct services, those that are providing the strategies, the supervision, so all staff. Okay. Let me just pause here. Any questions, thoughts before we go to our second focus area? Okay. Lisa, you want to take on our second focus area?
Absolutely. Okay. So part of this was really making sure that the work that we've done over the past 18 months is actually moving towards being operationalized and implemented. And so part of the work that we did was to do a policy lab with ICH, to do policy labs at the summit with local COCs, really helping to build capacity and skills for folks to examine all of the policies that guide the work that's being done to end homelessness, to determine if any of those policies could be reinforcing inequities. Thinking about areas that, we're seeing inflexible regulations or processes that are difficult for everyone to access. And so some of what we hope to see in the work that's moving forward is that there's a regular process where policies and practices are being audited to see what negative impacts they may be having for communities of color. And as we move forward and think about the shifts that are needed in those policies, how are we creating a really inclusive process where we have COC members and partners with lived experience and state representatives developing new policy, creating unified advocacy efforts, examining those statewide processes together to create a more inclusive way forward. Some of what we heard when we were doing this assessment was also the fact that local COCs want to have more diverse membership, but because of some of the state and federal regulations and requirements with, data entry and whatnot, it's really difficult for smaller grassroots organizations, minority-led organizations to engage and to be competitive for funding. And so local COCs were asking, for state partners to examine ways that they can help onboard more diverse COC members, network providers who want to be a part of the process. So it's really looking at ways to share power in different ways and to build inclusivity in different ways. Another recommendation that came up from our work with our local equitable results teams was ensuring that the RFPs that are developed with people with lived experience and frontline providers, because there's a more realistic sense of what the expectations and deadlines should be when the folks who are closest to the issues and challenges and barriers are helping to develop those RFPs. So this is part of how to amend state policies and processes to address those inequities. We talked already about the VI SPDAT and shifting that process. But in the meantime, even before we create a new process, there's an opportunity to give some really clear guidelines about not needing to use the VI SPDAT to prioritize individuals and families for housing resources. So even if the tool is still being used as an assessment, we want to move away from that tool being used to prioritize people for different types of housing, because we know that it's racially biased. So I'm gonna, because it's already 4:13, not read every bullet point, but I'll leave this here and ask if there's thoughts and feedback, questions about this particular focus area.
Lisa, as people are coming up with their questions, I just want to add a couple of things around resources that we can make sure that you have so you're not starting from scratch. So one, an auditing protocol for policies, one that you can use for all the policies that are in place now to do an audit to actually see where there's any harm or benefit to any particular group and like what could be done to mitigate that. But then also during the what I call the COVID period, whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of that, we had that same struggle around the states were saying, oh, well, we can't give any money, to the smaller groups or grassroots groups because, well, they don't have the financial this and that and the infrastructure and all of this and that. So we came up with an entire document looking across different states and found out that most of these things were not legislatively regulated, but rather they were rules that the finance committees and the different departments could actually undo and redo. And so we're happy to share that with you all. It's on HUD Exchange. It's been out there for a minute, but happy to pull that back up as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that would be great.
I guess I have a general comment on that. So looking at the federal and state regulations and reporting requirements that surpass the capacity of smaller organizations, I feel like that we need to, in some way, clearly articulate why that's important, right? Because I think that, if the goal of that is actually to have better representation of people with lived experience and in leadership roles that might impact the experience of service recipients for the better, this doesn't necessarily ensure that happens if we don't articulate why there's value in removing red tape, so to speak, for groups that might not have certain capacities. We could actually create the opposite of what we're trying to create if we don't replace those barriers with barriers that clearly indicate why others are being removed. I don't know if I'm being clear, but there's enough community groups and small grassroots initiatives that aren't people with lived experience that could actually cause worse experiences for service recipients if those barriers aren't supplanted with more intentional ones.
I really appreciate that feedback. This particular comment wasn't necessarily centered around inclusivity of lived experience, but it was more about inclusivity of culturally responsive providers and minority-led providers and organizations. So I think you're absolutely right to talk about why that's important, because any addition to your COC network could potentially dilute funding. It could make other people resistant, other providers, who are concerned about their funding and their organization. And so being able to clearly articulate what that new perspective brings, why those diverse ideas and perspectives will enhance service provision and create more sustainable solutions to ending homelessness. And absolutely, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Maybe a better way for me to say that, and to your point, it's not necessarily specific to people with lived experience. Another way of saying that would be, it's been my experience that at least in some geographies, the organizations that are quote unquote more grassroots or maybe have lower capacities don't inherently have more cultural competence. They might actually have significantly less and have been less intentional about that than some of the larger providers. On the other hand, you may have some geographies where the opposite is true. You may have some geographies where there aren't larger providers that don't have capacity, and the red tape that needs to be brought down is in order, or the additional capacities that have to be built need to happen in order to get any amount of service to people and to unlock funding, right? So I think it's just clarifying, Lisa, to your point, the intention of that, so that it's not, I think, a goal to entirely unwind any sort of standard of, fiduciary responsibility for providers, but to maybe emphasize and prioritize investing in an underinvested function and continuous of service, which is essentially cultural competency.
No, those are great points and nuances that absolutely that we can make sure that we're documenting. I think part of where this comes from, and you all certainly the folks that we spoke with for this are not the only ones that see that. The response has most times, probably 95% of the times, to the smaller groups in the neighborhoods who meet the immediate responses. They're the ones who go out on those cold nights and ask people, do you have a place to be, or take those blankets, or when things happen and take the food, because they know the folks right there, the most trusted. But when they ask for funds from that, for government funds, where they're told, well, if we give you, you don't know how to handle them. What there is in many of those cases, and especially in folks of color led of those smaller groups, there is an assumption that you can't handle the finances if you are, provided those. So that's one thing that we're trying to tackle, right? Because you're always trying to get at the root cause. So that's a nuance to what you're adding, but certainly to not unravel the fiduciary responsibility of certainly everyone has to, you have a fiscal responsibility whenever you get funds, but we don't want to make assumptions about what people can't and cannot handle, right? Just because because they are folks of color, or that they're, a smaller neighborhood organization. So those are some of those, but to your point, there are about 3 or 4 different nuances that we absolutely can spell out,
Yeah, I fully appreciate the intent of that, for sure. I mean, I think that that's 100% true, and I also know of many examples of the opposite, of people who are well-intentioned, but I don't need to belabor it.
Yeah.
But.
All right, well, I
absolutely.
think we're at time for this. I apologize. I know we took a little extra time on the Homeless Policy Council item, which was really timely. So I apologize that we're not giving you the full amount of time that you deserve on this issue today. And we can work with Jason to look at other ways that we can continue this dialogue. So I don't know if we want to just put some more time on the agenda for the next meeting, or if there's some other opportunity. One question I wondered was just who was part of the process for developing this action plan?
Everyone that we've met with. Yeah, Lisa, you want to jump in because you probably even have the list in front of you.
Sure. I don't have the list, but I will say that over the past 18 months, we worked with local COC equitable results teams, and we had 18 out of the 20 COCs submit quantitative data. So some of this is centered around where the greatest inequities were for Indigenous, Black, and Hispanic households, around length of time homeless, around returns, around just overrepresentation in their experiences of homelessness. We also worked on a very regular basis with 12 COCs who also did listening sessions in their communities with frontline providers and folks with lived experience to identify what the needs were for their communities. Each of those 12 COCs put together a local racial equity action plan, and we reviewed those plans to pull out trends and priorities that were clearly stated in several of the plans to develop this. We also had several working sessions to ask local COC representatives, what is it that you want from statewide partners to support the advancing of racial equity for your community? What do you need to see from them? And so a lot of these strategies are from that process.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Okay, we'll jump off. Thank you all so much. But if you can please think about the question that we asked, because we would love this, because this was fantastic, the kinds of complexities and layers that you all are bringing to it. So we stand ready to continue the conversation with you. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And
Thank
we'll
you,
send out this,
appreciate it.
this version. The other one had some formatting issues. We'll resend.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone. Happy
Um,
holidays.
same to you. So we still have 7 minutes, so I want to make sure we have time I'm going to pause on the roundtable and let's jump to public comment and just see if there's anybody that is on virtually, because we don't have any members of the public here in the room with us that wanted to make any kind of public comment today. Again, if you're participating virtually and you're a member of the public and want to make public comment, this is the time to do so. So if you want to unmute yourself, we would be happy to entertain public comment at the moment. Just going to give it a few more seconds, so in case people are having trouble unmuting or something like that, just to make sure that we don't shortchange anyone. Okay, I think hearing none, we can go back up to the round table, and this is a chance if anybody has anything that they want to share. But can I just ask for one quick point of clarification? Can somebody give an update on where we are with the annual report and if it's officially ready and been released for the current year and just where we stand with that?
Great question. I'll take that one for the team. And so where we are is Mishta's designer, that's the lead for the project, is collecting final, trying to think of the timeline. She's collecting the final edits. I think the cutoff is tomorrow at noon. And then as far as we are concerned, then it should be good to go. I think the youth section we had a couple of sections that folks had like some final tweaks that they wanted to make.
Yeah, I saw Jen sent a couple
Yeah.
of comments, but I haven't had a chance to look.
Okay, yeah, if you can take a look at it by noon tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw the deadline, thank you.
But, we're very close to having the final version.
So can we just better understand like what the delay was this year? I mean, again, I'm not trying to kick it, like get anybody in trouble here, but like, I mean, it's really going to come out now almost in January of 2024, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And it's the 2022
Yes.
date
Yeah,
set, so it feels very outdated by the time that we release it, so just trying to understand, typically we try to have it done September, October, aligning it with the summit, and just help me understand what were the delays that created us being so far behind this year.
Data wasn't usable until mid-August, the quantitative data in the HMIS system, because we had identified anomalies with the group started meeting on their normal timeline, identified anomalies with the data quality to the point where we weren't comfortable sharing the data publicly because it was so unreliable. So we gave providers, I think it was a 6-week window to clean up the data, which took us into August.
And did we see major cleanup in that?
Yeah.
Where we
Yeah.
did see major changes based
Yeah,
on that?
like roughly 10% decreases, where there should have been decreases all along. So, so that was the major issue that we ran into is.
And do we know what contributed to that? Like, why was the data
Combination of factors, folks.
so unreliable this year in comparison
A lot
to
of
previous?
a lot of it came from, from clients not being exited from the system in a timely way.
Okay.
And, so Micah's HMIS team did a training, showed system administrators how to go in and pull the reports to identify, where the problems were, and then showed them how to, once they identified the problems, had to go in and clean them up. And that was across provider types, because there were some folks at HHS that were also running into long, I mean, we had length of stays and like the thousands of days. And we didn't need many of those to skew things.
Right.
I mean, because that not only hit the demographics, so for those of you familiar with the report, we have kind of the state level demographic table where we do the year-to-year comparison.
Right.
But it also skewed our strategic performance measures. So like statewide length of stays, because we had so many people with like 2,000 to 3,000 days length of stays, it was skewing.
Length of stay
Yeah, like
significantly.
everything was thrown off.
Okay. So feel like we're in a better place to make sure that next year's data will be cleaner, and is that something that Micah is sort of monitoring, or?
I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation with the policy council.
Okay.
I mean, because that group meets much more frequently than the ICH.
Right.
But it's definitely, it is on folks' radar to no longer make assumptions that these kind of things are happening. That that there's data cleaning or data maintenance just going on.
So for the sake of just the council, sort of, can you just give us like the highlights, like for 2022, are we seeing an increase, a decrease of homelessness overall? Like what should we expect that's sort of coming?
You didn't give me time to prep the full presentation. So between calendar year 21 and calendar year 22, there was an 8% increase in the number of folks that experienced homelessness, which anecdotally from talking to folks in the field, I think we were braced for an even larger increase than what we actually saw. Because we were hearing from certain parts of the state that they were seeing pretty significant increases. And kind of across the board, within some regions, we saw rather significant increases, and then in some regions, we saw rather significant decreases, and significant being like greater than 20%. That's the standard.
Yeah, that's a big swing in a year.
Yeah.
That's a big swing.
Yeah. So that kind of that's kind of the overarching trend. Is that it's, things are we're going up. And then that played out with like length of stay and some of the other strategic performance measures. We, ultimately our goal is to see decreases with these things, but unfortunately we were seeing that those were also staying up or trending the wrong direction as well.
Well, so I think it's worth having some discussion to kind of dig in once it's public, like that this body should sort of understand what the report is showing us and telling us, and then also as we're sort of ending calendar year 23, I think we are most likely anticipating that it's still going in the wrong, numbers are still most likely going in the wrong direction, right? We're still seeing increases, but we don't have that data yet, obviously, but anecdotally, I think that's what we're sort of hearing. I know, from our ESP program, we are hearing, varying wait times for whole family shelter for sure, but even in some communities for single shelters where we've had, a handful of shelters close or have to take beds offline because of staffing shortages and some other kinds of things like that. So, we are concerned kind of going into the winter months where this could lead across the state. So I say that to say, since we're the body that's kind of supposed to be paying attention to some of those things, and I know that we only meet quarterly, I just want to make sure that we are having the right kinds of conversations about what the numbers and the data is showing us, and then we're having conversation about what, if anything, needs to happen or not happen in relation to what this is looking like across the state. And so while I appreciate the Homeless Policy Council and its role, and I know that it meets monthly, but with the reconfiguration of that, it's going to take them a little bit of time to kind of get their feet underneath them. And I just don't want to lose time, and I think we need to be having more strategic conversations about the state of homelessness in Michigan and what's happening, and if we have gaps or other kinds of things that we need to be strategizing around. So I don't know, once it's official, I know that there will be a time,
like we usually do like a webinar where we release some of the data, et cetera, and that will be shared with the policy council, but I sort of feel like, I mean, the ICH, but I sort of feel like, you know, if there's an opportunity to do something specific with the ICH around it, where we can also have some dialogue. So I don't know if March meeting best makes the most sense, or if we want to schedule something separate. Obviously, it would have to be sort of viewed in a public setting if we have more than, you know, the 5. Yeah.
I mean, I think we'd have to plan for that. So the Open Meetings Act, you know, like
Right.
this meeting, if it was an officially sanctioned ICH gathering.
Right, if it's more
we
than.
we just have to make sure it's compliant, which,
Right, it's fine.
yeah,
We shouldn't let that hold us back from,
no, I mean, we have, as long as we advertise it more than a week ahead of time, we're fine.
yeah.
So, and we obviously have the space here that we could use.
So Jason, if we were to call a special session, would we be able to do it virtually, or would it still only be in person if we didn't have any voting, but it was more for just conversation around the results of the annual report?
That is a great question, and one that we would have to get back to you on.
Yeah, let's look into that to see if it's
Yeah, I would
possible to do that.
understand.
If it's more of an informational meeting, I mean, with a little bit of discussion, but no sort of recommendations would be made at that. We could save those for the March meeting or something, but at least it gives
Right.
us some background in preparation for a March meeting where we might be able to have more in-depth conversation or something.
And our time is so limited.
Right.
Even today, we were cut short on
Right.
Yeah.
the bulk of our content.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been,
It might
it's been
behoove us
standard.
to,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you'll check into that and just
I
let
will
us
look
know.
into it, yeah, and I'll check with our legal team to see if we could schedule, because there are no decisions being made.
Right,
You
it
know,
could
we're
be
not-
held virtually
Right.
versus in person.
Yeah.
and still publish and post it, agenda, all
Yeah,
the like,
exactly,
I mean,
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
What were you gonna say, Ryan?
Good point. But I was just gonna say the general point on this issue of going into the winter months and realizing these numbers are going in the direction they're going. At a local level, what our organization is a family shelter provider, its experience is the challenge of, once that recognition happens, it doesn't necessarily, leave organizations with the time to actually meet the need in a timely manner. So to your point about staffing shortages, typically what ends up happening is there's a realization that strategically public agencies have underfunded an issue. Providers are usually voicing that year over year, saying, hey, we've never really had the capacity to meet the scope of the need. Once it's more visible, there's this, we need to respond to it now, but there's not really the realistic expectations around how long it takes to reach capacity to be able to provide that additional thing. So I think the sooner the better, to have those conversations. And I don't even know that we need statewide data, that's that current, to recognize that problem and take action on that problem. Because I think that that's been a problem that maybe has been a little bit masked thanks to some expansion in rental assistance over the last few years, but it's probably, if you look pre-COVID, you would see a trend line that is really not really abated in regards to lack of capacity for shelter providers to meet those needs during the winter.
And I think, you know, again, I mean, I know that with the letter that was, you know, done, that's going to the governor with the sort of budget priorities in there, you know, and a meeting being set up to kind of walk through with somebody on her team, right, that letter and the priorities. I mean, there might be an opportunity for this conversation as well, but we kind of need to have our ducks in a row about what an ask might look like, et cetera. Because, yeah, we're concerned, I'll say that at MDHHS, like, we're concerned about what's to come, just given what we're hearing from our providers, and, you know, we need lots of voices behind that. It's gonna have to be larger than, you know, as one agency's voice around it.
And the status of your ARP and ESSER funds, you still have some of those that are in play currently this year, or is, on the housing side of things, are all of those COVID funding sources gone?
We didn't have any of those COVID funding sources for sort of shelter operational costs. The only thing we had specific to that was the infrastructure dollars, which was allowing shelters to make, you know, infrastructure improvements related to health and safety. So that was the only COVID money that we had specific for shelter support at our department.
At DHHS, but we also have the statewide non-congregate shelter pool through MISTA.
Correct, yeah.
But I think we're constantly chasing,
Yeah.
I just got, for our shelter project that we're working on, I just got some construction numbers back that were dramatically higher than we were thinking they were going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to find that most of the projects that have been aligning themselves around these first initial pools and resources, unless, I know that inflation is abating more generally, but in the construction space, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be in a tough spot when you actually look at the aggregate of all the different projects that are trying to meet that need longer term from a capital perspective, having the realization of what the true costs are going to be to actually execute.
Yeah.
If ours is any indication, which I think it is, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jason's gonna find out about the data, and then we can lead from there. About if we can do me virtually, but we'll work to get something scheduled either way. If it has to be a special session where we can, and have to be in person, I think people are committed to being able to do that, so we can kind of have this ongoing conversation. So I just want to, I know we're over time, so I'm going to say, we can adjourn, we have to vote, right, to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take the motion to adjourn. Craig?
Wait, though.
I'm looking, okay, who's seconding?
That's a safe one.
Yeah, exactly. We need a second.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. I just want to say thank you all. I thought this was a great meeting. I loved the dialogue. I felt like it was a very interactive meeting where people were really contributing to that, and I just really appreciate that, because I just think that that's important. You all come here with wisdom and experience, and I just really appreciate, people jumping in and.
I don't even know how to talk to each other anymore, are we?
I just said thank you.
I was gonna say thank you for a meeting. It was a good meeting.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
You're stuck with us quarterly.
Yeah.
So, thank you,
And
everyone.
good to see
Appreciate it.
Kelly on the screen.
Yes, thank you,
we miss
Kelly.
you.
All right. Turn our little buttons off here, and we are good to go.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye, Tora. Take care, Tora.